Hello, my name is Joey, and this is A Game of Authors. I'm starting a new booktube channel, and this is the first video that I'm making. And it's going to be an original book tag, which I call I Love the Book, I Love the Movie tag. And so what this is I'm going to go through my top 10 books that I love that were made into movies that I love. And I'm going to tag a few people that I hope will also make the video. And so I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly, and I might make some videos in the future to talk a little bit more about them, but for this tag, it's just going to be kind of quickly going through the list. So these are books that I read and I loved that were made into movies that I love, and I'd love to also hear your top 10. Either in the comments, or if you have a booktube channel, I hope you can make a video of the same thing. So number 10 for me is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, and the book was published in 1813, and the movie I like is this version with Keira Knightley, made in 2005. Number 9 is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, which was published in 1862, and the movie version in 2012, which I love. I love the music. Actually watched that movie first, and I just fell in love with the story and the music and everything about it, and then I went and read the book, and it's a long book, but it was very enjoyable, and I really liked that story. So number 8 is a play by Horton Foote called The Trip to Bountiful, which was originally produced on Broadway or off Broadway in 1953, and was later made into a teleplay in the 50s or 60s, and then finally into a movie in 1985, starring John Hurd and Geraldine Page, who won the Academy Award. She won the Academy Award for her portrayal in that movie. I will take a few minutes to describe that one, or a little bit to describe that one, because it's probably some that you might not be as familiar with. It's a story of an elderly woman who lives with her son and daughter-in-law in a cramped apartment in Houston in the 1950s, and she really wants to go back to her hometown of Bountiful, Texas. And so the movie progresses through her kind of sneaking off and taking a bus ride home, and you meet some other characters, and there's really just there's a struggle there between her and her son, played by John Hurd, and it's all about remembering and life and hearkening back to childhood, and kind of this struggle between, is it better to remember and hold on to those memories, or to kind of try to forget and move forward. And Horton Foote is one of my favorite writers, and just does an amazing job writing about those types of subjects, about remembering childhood. So that's number 8, The Trip to Bountiful. Number 7, another play by Horton Foote, which was made into a movie, is called Valentine's Day, which is one of the plays in this book here, which is a cycle of 9 plays that follow the life of Horace Robideau from childhood up through adulthood. And so Valentine's Day is toward the middle of the book, and it references the fact that he and his wife eloped on Valentine's Day the prior year, and the whole play is set on the current Valentine's Day and just some of the things that are going on in the town on that day. And it deals with issues of life and death and grief and sorrow, and again remembering. And it's stars a young Matthew Broderick, and it's a play that I've read 2 or 3 times, and a movie that I've watched 3 or 4 times, and I really love. So that's number 7. Number 6, which I don't have a copy of here, is David Copperfield, the classic by Charles Dickens. David Copperfield was published in 1850 and was made into a movie. The movie I like is the BBC version miniseries, which was around 1986 to 87. And I remember watching that with my mother on PBS back at that time. So that's a great classic story. I'm sure you're familiar with David Copperfield. It's the first Dickens story I read in the illustrated abridged edition as a child, and I went back and reread the full version several years ago, and I just love the story, and I love that version of the movie. Number 5 is No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. which was made into this 2010 movie. I'm sorry, the book was published in 2005, made into this 2007 movie, I correct myself, by the Coen brothers, which won the Academy Award for Best Picture. No Country for Old Men is it's my favorite McCarthy book, and I have read several books by McCarthy. I like a lot of them, and there's a couple that didn't do much for me. I like The Road, but my favorite is No Country for Old Men, and I think the movie did a really good job. And it follows the main character, Llewellyn Moss, who discovers a briefcase full of money, and it asks the question, what is a person willing to do to hold on to $2 million that doesn't belong to them? What might a person do to take that money, to try to keep that money, to try to hold on to that money? And what are some of the consequences that might come to that person and their loved ones because of that decision? So it's bleak, it's dark, it's violent. It's the only rated R movie on the list here, I believe. But I like McCarthy's books. They deal with some biblical imagery and some themes of life and death and mortality and sin and depravity and things like that. So I think I like the movie. I like the book as well. So that's number 5. Number 4 on my top 10 books/movies is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which was published in 1843. And as far as the movie goes, it's not any particular movie. I really love all of the Christmas Carol movies. It's one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite Christmas stories. And I have a couple of the movies here. This is Disney's A Christmas Carol with Jim Carrey, which is, I liked this one, this cartoon one. It's not my favorite. There is one scene in here that I'm not crazy about, where the Jim Carrey Scrooge character he gets shrunk down and is like the size of a mouse, and I think they did that more for the 3D effect. I don't think it really adds anything to the story, but apart from that, the animation is wonderful in that movie, and they do a pretty good job. And this is a family favorite, Mickey's Christmas Carol, which we watch several times every Christmas. But I love all of the movie versions, the 1930s version with Reginald Owen, the 50s version with Alistair Sim, the 1970 musical Scrooge with Albert Finney, and the 1980s version with George C. Scott. I've watched all of those probably more than once, and I love the story of A Christmas Carol. I love the character of Tiny Tim and Bob Cratchit, and the dynamic there between the father and son, and just to see the effect of Scrooge and how his outlook on life changes as he encounters these ghosts and sees what his life has been about, from the past, present, and what it could be in the future. So it's a great story and a great book. I've read several times. I've read it to my children, and I love watching the movies. Number 3 on my list is Our Town by Thornton Wilder, and this book was, or the play was produced in 1938 and won the Pulitzer Prize. And the movie version that I really like is the 1989 version that was done for great performances on PBS, and it stars Penelope Ann Miller as Emily Webb. I have read this book several times, and in my mind, the third act of Our Town is one of the most powerful pieces of writing in American literature, or any literature. I cannot read Act 3 of Our Town or watch it in that play without breaking down and crying every time I read it. And what this book did for me, and specifically Act 3, is that it helped me to really think seriously about the wonder of life, every minute of life. And I remember after reading that book, I was sitting with my children and they were just playing or doing something. I remember thinking, 20 years from now, I will probably want to give anything to be able to come back and just experience what's currently taking place here. There's so much wonder, and it's amazing. This is a gift. I mean, every minute is a gift, and why not enjoy that experience right now as it's happening and really appreciate it? So it helped me to kind of step back, and you get so busy with life and things going on, and to just say, I'm going to just stop and take all this in and experience it now. And, you can't do that all the time, but that book really helped me to view life in that way and to want to experience every moment. So that is number 3 on my top favorite is Our Town. Number 2 on my top 10 books/movies is True Grit by Charles Portis, which was published in 1968. And it was made into 2 great movies. In 1969, starring John Wayne and Glenn Campbell and Kim Darby. And again in 2010 by the Coen brothers and starring Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, and Haley Steinfeld. A couple things I want to say about this. I love the book. The story of True Grit follows Maddie Ross, a 14-year-old girl who is going into the Indian Territory to avenge the murder of her father and to try to catch the murderer, Tom Chaney. And along the way, she hires a U.S. Marshal, Rooster Cogburn, and they also end up working with a Texas Ranger named LaBeef. So it's a story of those 3 characters going into the territory, and it's a journey, and the relationship between those 3 and the dialogue is amazing. There's drama, but there's so much humor, and the way Portis writes is just very funny, but they're not punchlines. They're just, he writes the way people talk, but they'll say something, and it's just so funny. And it's being narrated by Maddie Ross when she's an older woman, probably in the 1920s, looking back on this story that happened when she was young. The introduction to this version is by Donna Tartt, who is the Pulitzer Prize winner for author of The Goldfinch. Something she says about this book is that her great-grandmother originally read this book and then recommended it to Donna Tartt's mother, who then recommended it to Donna Tartt's grandmother, who then recommended that Donna, a child at that time, read the book. All 4 of them, 4 generations, read the book, and they all loved it. They all had different reading tastes, but this was one book they could all agree upon, that every one of them loved the book. And I've seen that in my family, that I've read it, and 2 of my kids have read it. It is an amazing story, and I would personally nominate this when they talk about what is the great American novel. This is one book that would be at the very top of that list in my mind. On the back here is a quote by Roald Dahl, who was the author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He says, "True Grit is the best novel to come my way for a very long time. What book has given me greater pleasure in the last 5 years, or in the last 20? What a writer." And I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I've read this book 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times in the past 5 years. And I've watched both movies several times. So I love the book. The 1969 movie with John Wayne is a classic, and it's really good. And I like him and Glenn Campbell, the acting. I like Glenn Campbell's song, True Grit. But I really love the 2010 version, which is here, this version here, with Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon and Haley Steinfeld, done by the Coen brothers. And why I like this movie better than the original is I think it does a better job of capturing the spirit and the humor of the book. Even though they actually change the story in several places, there's so many funny lines and humor there that really fits more with the original spirit of the book. And I love the soundtrack. The music that's playing in the background is based in some of the old hymns that I grew up singing and listening to. What a Friend We Have in Jesus, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms and The Gloryland Way. So it's just a great movie, so that's number 2 on my list. Number 1 is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith, which was published in 1943 and made into a wonderful movie in 1945, starring James Dunn, who does just an excellent job as the father, Johnny Nolan. So Tree Grows in Brooklyn is the story of Francie Nolan and her brother Neely and their parents Johnny and Katie Nolan. And so many wonderful scenes in both the book and the movie. I've read the book twice, and I've watched the movie probably 4 or 5 times. I just want to say one thing about this movie. There's one scene in the movie where, and the movie is heart-wrenching and wonderful and beautiful, and I love it, as well as the book, which is one of my favorite books. But there's one scene in the movie where Francie is upset because the tree outside their shabby apartment, there's only one tree there, and the people, workers or whoever, is cutting it down. And her papa comes home, and a key theme in this book is that Johnny is an alcoholic, and he has trouble supporting the family, holding down a job. He works as a part-time wedding singer, so he is a flawed father, but yet he has so much to offer to the family in his love of life, his zest for life. And so he comes home, and she's upset because she says, "Papa, they're tearing down our tree." And he says, oh no, Francie, they can't tear down that tree. Because look at it, that tree, it's growing up through the cement there, and it's pushing through the cement. If they tear it down, it'll just push itself right back up through there, and it'll keep growing. So they can't tear down that tree because it's just going to keep growing. And as he's saying this to her, and it's the realization coming in her mind, and she just looks at him with this love and awe, and she leans over and hugs him and says, "Oh, Papa, my cup runneth over." And I love that line. I just love that this flawed father who, for her to say to him, "My cup runneth over," which basically is from Psalm 23 and means, you're providing me more than I need, that it overflows. And so you have this father who clearly is not providing everything that this family needs because because of his alcoholism, he can't work enough to support the family, but yet he offers so much to this family, and to Francie in particular, of who he is and the tenderness that he gives to her, the love, the emotion, the love of life, so much that she says to him, "Papa, my cup runneth over." And that is both a statement to him and I believe a prayer to God, that this person you've put in my life, God, because of him and because of you, my cup runneth over. So I want to, that movie, to me, I want to be the type of father and the type of person that when my effect on people would be that they would be glad that I'm in their life, to the extent that someone would look at me like one of my son or my daughter would look at me and say, "Papa, my cup runneth over." So I love that line. There's a lot of other good stuff in there in the book and the movie, but I am pushing it on time here. So again, this is the I love the book, I love the movie tag, and we're going to say hashtag love the book, love the movie. I'm going to tag a few booktubers that I like down in the description, and I hope they will do the tag. And if you watch this and you're a booktuber and you like the concept here, I hope you'll do this tag, because I'd love to hear what your top 10 favorite books/movies are. So again, thanks for watching. This is my first video, and if you like what you see, I hope you'll subscribe, and I will try to make some more videos for you to watch. Thank you so much.